Sure. I'm Adriana Kelly. I'm one of your academic advisors. And just for anybody who came in after Renee said it, we are recording this session. So I just hit record in case you don't feel like being on camera. But yeah, I'm one of your academic advisors. It's nice to see everybody.
And I've been speaking, but I'm Renee Finnemore. I'm your other academic advisor. So glad to see you all here today. And we'll talk more about what Adriana and I do a little bit later on in the session. But I think I've talked to some of the people that are here already, so that's exciting. So, Christine.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Christine Ferretti, and I am the Director of Field Education for the online MSW. And we are looking forward to getting to know you all through this process.
I think we have a few other field faculty in here as well. So Josette, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon. Happy Monday. Name's Josette, field faculty. Usually place students who are out of state or in Florida, you never know. Also usually teach the generalist field web course as you enter into your first internship. So nice to meet everybody, and I look forward to working with you all.
You want me to go next? This is Shelley Hall. My video is not working, so I apologize for that. But I'm another field faculty and instructor and teach a couple of generalist courses and place students throughout the state of Florida. So I look forward to working with you all.
Hi, this is Jan Ricks. I am a field faculty and I'm new and very excited about being on board.
I think you might be muted, Renee. It's one of those days. It's a Monday. We're all having tech issues. Bear with us. We'll get through it.
Okay, my computer had a little crazy hiccup there, and it kept muting and unmuting at the same time. Like, it was very interesting. I would click it and it would immediately go back to mute. I'm like, oh, I'm clicking too hard. So normally I don't have this kind of problem. I don't know. It's the rain. So just to give you an idea of what we're going to talk about today. So this is your chance to sort of understand what's happening in the process, like how that's going to work. You'll learn a lot more when you are in the field placement process itself. So really today we're just going to be covering what happens during field placement, what those requirements look like for field placement sites and activities, what you can do to ensure that you successfully get placed at an agency, what happens if you have a failed placement, what that means, things that you're going to want to consider as you're getting placed, what to do if you, after hearing all this information, you realize that maybe you need to take a break before going into field placement. So we're going to talk about all those things and maybe a little bit more today. So we'll jump right ahead. So just to give you an idea, you've met some of them. So you have multiple people who are part of your field team here. So the field director, Ms. Ferretti, and the field faculty you've met. You'll also have a field seminar instructor, a field agency instructor, and an agency task supervisor. And Ms. Ferretti, do you want to kind of explain a little bit about these roles?
Sure. So as Renee mentioned, I'm the coordinator director, and I also do teach the clinical field courses. And then we have Miss Janice, Rix, and Josette von Berglund, and Shelley Hall are our full-time field faculty. And you will come across their names in the placement process. And then they also teach some of our field seminar courses. So some of the people, some of the faculty overlap with one another. So you could have me just interacting with you as the field director. You could also have me interacting with you if you have me in your field course, or I could also be the person placing you. Same thing with the other 3 full-time field faculty, Ms. Hall, Ms. von Berglund, and Ms. Rix. And then your field seminar instructor, we do have our full-time field faculty do teach the field seminar courses, and then we have a few part-time field faculty who teach the field seminar courses. Your field agency instructor is going to be the MSW at the agency that you're assigned to. That is going to be your supervisor at the agency. So those are kind of used interchangeably. Field agency instructor or field supervisor is sometimes referred to. Sometimes in an agency, you might have an agency task supervisor. So that might look like a situation where maybe you're placed at a hospital and the social worker kind of rotates different units. The field agency instructor who's supervising you, and maybe you only get to see that social worker once a week for supervision, but the agency task supervisor is maybe your day-to-day person who's overseeing your tasks and giving you feedback about the work that you're doing. And that person may or may not have a social work degree.
Do you want to talk about the tasks and types of agencies students can expect?
Sure. So for the generalist year of placement, so a generalist placement is an entry-level social work practice placement. So that's going to look like a lot of case management. You're going to be assessing needs and resources or obtaining resources, doing referrals, maybe some discharge planning, maybe some intakes. And then many times agencies will have students helping to develop and improve resources. And it could be at places like emergency shelters, maybe domestic violence shelters, homeless shelters, crisis hotlines, sometimes a suicide crisis hotline, sexual assault prevention hotline, or hotlines that are crisis for basic needs like housing. And then sometimes some grief and loss programs, sometimes the bereavement program, maybe at hospice, functioning similar to how the bereavement volunteers would, maybe doing follow-up calls to those who have recently lost a loved one, or maybe helping to facilitate some of the support groups. Other examples would be emergency assistance, so food, housing, clothing, and then community resource and referral agencies. So that might look like, you know, in a medical setting, that would look like discharge planning, providing resources to the patients or clients as they're exiting out, you know, kind of looks different for every agency. For example, at a school, a generalist student, that would look more like maybe some crisis intervention, or maybe going into the classrooms to help the school social worker teach about social and emotional wellness, or maybe helping the social worker to teach the faculty at the school or the administrators about like trauma-informed responses or behavioral interventions and things like that. So that's kind of a broad overview. Again, it kind of looks different at every agency, but it is an entry-level placement, and you're going to be doing a lot of mostly learning about case management.
Sorry, I got excited to show them what the web course looks like, but do you want to tell
It's
them
so
about the
beautiful.
invitation that's coming?
Sure. So this week, by Friday. I'm hoping to release it by like about 1 p.m., but it might be closer to 5 p.m. But sometime before I leave on Friday, you'll receive an invitation in your Knights email account. And that's going to be an invitation that's going to come from WebCourses. So you won't see my name pop up, but it'll be an invitation from WebCourses directly. And that's going to be for you to enter into the placement process course. So the placement process course is a non-credit web course, very similar to your advising portal when you entered the program, but it's just field focused. And so it's going to be the online MSW mandatory field placement process for spring 2022. So you're going to go ahead and accept the invitation and enter into the class, and then you'll get started on some of the assignments. And then the deadlines are all obviously in the web course, but you'll just want to pay close attention to them because sometimes they're not always on a Sunday. And I know that you're all used to that from your regular classes, things being due on a Sunday. So there's obviously no, it's not assignments that are, papers or research or quizzes or tests or things like that. It's just very simple assignments, again, similar to your advising portal, where it's going to just be documents with, for example, expectations or policies that we really want you to be aware of. And you're going to go ahead and read through those and then confirm in the assignment that you've read and you understand the contents. That's the first two assignments are similar to that. And then the third assignment is the placement process information form. That deadline comes up pretty quickly. And what that is it's a form that you're going to complete that talks about, where you're living, where you're going to be living when you're placed, because that is how we determine which faculty you're going to be assigned to for placement. And that's how we can get started with your placement, trying to secure an agency that's willing to interview you and host you for placement. Other things in there, you'll have an opportunity to say, if you have any background issues that we need to be aware of in your placement process, or if you foresee any barriers that you might need a conference call, to discuss before we dive into your placement process. So it's pretty basic, but it's important to be thorough on there. And then the next module will be your actual field placement application. So you'll take a deeper dive into some of your information in terms of, what population would you like to maybe work with and why. And again, these are kind of ways to see what your interest areas are. Doesn't necessarily mean, the goal is, right, to match you where your interest areas are, but that's up to agencies that are willing to host and who's taking students. So it'd be ideal if it worked out that way. That's the goal. It doesn't always work out that way, but it's still nice for us to know when we're having the lens of placing you. It's still good for us to know kind of what you feel drawn to. And also if there's a population that you really feel strongly that you need for personal reasons to steer away from. Sometimes we have students that have been in recovery for many years that actually prefer not to work with the addictions population. That's an example. Sometimes we have students that may have just lost a loved one recently and are still kind of fresh in their grief, and they really feel like it's better for them to kind of steer away from the grief and loss population. So just an example. Your resume, you'll want to make sure that's up to date. You'll want to make sure it's thorough. That's what we're going to be sending out to agencies to try to secure you a placement. So you'll want to make sure your Knights email is on your resume, any volunteer work that you've done, any work out in the community that you think is pertinent, and things like that. And then you'll do a narrative. It's about 5 or 6 questions. Again, it's going to kind of just describe what brought you into the profession, what drew you to social work, and a little bit about what your lens is on different populations. And so that's kind of, how the assignments will go. And the other assignments, again, are just kind of policies, expectations, things like that we really want you to be able to read and confirm that you reviewed that information. The course goes all the way from, when I open it in a week, and then there are assignments all the way throughout your whole placement process, right? So there's going to be an assignment in there that when you get an interview for an agency, you'll put that in to confirm, okay, I met with this agency to have an interview. And then all the way at the end, before the semester starts, you'll submit like a placement process or placement confirmation form that's going to be signed by the person supervising you at the agency, and be signed, a contract pretty much, that's your confirmed placement. So there's a couple of things that trickle. The first two modules are kind of heavy, and the deadlines come up kind of quick, and then it kind of trickles and spreads out a little more.
Want to talk a little bit about placement requirements for an agency?
Yes. So,
oh, this actually looks like this is student requirements for placement.
Okay. So it's, again, I mentioned the background before. So we really want to know that up front. It's very important because there are some agencies that require level 2 background screenings and fingerprinting. And we have a few agencies that do not require that. And so if you do have any criminal, drug history, driving record, any kind of background indicators that you feel like if you do a background check, it might be a barrier, we just want to know that up front so we can kind of have a transparent conversation. And that way, when we are, we can have that lens on while we are, looking to secure you a placement. So we can try to match you somewhere that maybe doesn't have, a level 2, but might have just a, a level 1 background check and things like that. A little easier in the generalist year. That doesn't seem to create as much of a barrier. In the clinical year, usually creates more of a barrier because that's really where you're going to be working closely with vulnerable populations, possibly doing home visits, and being more involved in the one-on-one interaction of the clients. And then, of course, you want to submit your field application by the deadline, the placement process information form and the field application and your resume. Module 1 and 2, you really want to make sure that you submit that on time or early, because we can't move forward in the placement process. The placement process kind of stops if we don't have that information, because that is, again, how we go ahead and we delegate who's going to be placing you. And then that person, that faculty, then starts to work on each student's placement process. And so anytime that there's a delay, that kind of delays the whole process. And you don't want to be having any delays because, it's now only July, but time goes pretty quickly. And before you know it, we'll be like at the December mark. And you don't want to, have any delays in you having a secured placement before the spring semester starts. And then, of course, when we will send you an email that is a matching email that lets you know that you're assigned to this agency to go on an interview. So, of course, you'll want to treat it just like a job interview. You'll want to be dressed professionally. You'll want to bring your resume. You'll want to research the agency beforehand and have some questions for them. Be interested and invested in the work that they do. And so you're fully prepared for the interview. And then, of course, continuing to complete the placement process orientation course, the web course that we're speaking about, and really reading thoroughly through that information, because it can be a lot. It can feel like, because it's July, okay, I'm just going to skim this, right? But you don't want any surprises in the expectations or the requirements when it comes time for us to match you and for you to go ahead and jump in to your placement in January. The last thing, which is the first bullet, but I saved it till last, for the availability. So very important. It's stated many times. I know when you applied to the program, you already had to sign something at the application of the program, talking about availability. You had to answer questions about it in your application to the program. And then the advisors have you sign more documentation about your availability for internships. So we just want to keep reiterating, really important for you to be available during normal business hours. Agencies just do not want to allow students to only be during nights and weekends. They just will not take a student that's only available during those times. There's usually not social workers to supervise students at that time, and you don't get a full kind of experience of how the agency operates. And so our agencies will not partner with us. They will not agree to take a student who can only do nights and weekends. You can do, sometimes they will let you do some nighttime hours or maybe a weekend, but not if you can only be there at the nights and on the weekends. That's going to go ahead and stop your placement process if that's your availability. And then you'll have to maybe sit out a semester or sometimes 2 semesters to be able to rework your schedule so that you are available to attend your placement. So most agencies want students there. If you have to do 10 hours a week, they're wanting students there 2 days a week for 5 hours each time. Sometimes agencies will allow students to come break up the 10 hours into 3 days, but not anything with doing all 10 hours in one day, and not anything with coming for 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday, 2 hours like that. So just to kind of be aware of that and really start thinking about what that's going to look like. I know that you guys have already been in the program almost a year by now, and so you've had some time to kind of think about that. But just really thinking about what that's going to look like for you, because again, unfortunately, it's not really up to us as the faculty to say to the agency, oh, this student is only available from 8 to 10 a.m. And so you have to let them come, right? It's whatever meets the needs of the agency. And so that's why we have these policies and these expectations that we like to reiterate very early on so that people can be thinking and kind of navigating the logistics of that.
Thank you, Christine. Do you want to talk a little bit about what employment-based field placement would look like?
Yeah, so sometimes students are eligible to do an employment-based field placement. So what that's going to look like is it's going to look like, say you work at an agency. I'm trying to think, let's just say you work at a hospital, and you're working in one unit of the hospital, and there's an opportunity for you to do your internship in another unit of the hospital. So there's going to be, you're going to have 2 different roles. And so you would then need, you would have your job supervisor and your job. And then outside of that, you would have your internship in a different unit with a different supervisor. And so the thing that you're doing for internship, of course, has to match the placement level. So it has to constitute new learning for you. So in other words, you can't do, case management with this set of clients that are adults, but then in the same program, do case management with the children, right? It really needs to be a separate learning opportunity and a separate supervisor for that piece. And it's up to the agency if they want to pay you for that separate piece or not. Most agencies want you to do your whole 40 hours of work, and then they want you to do your internship outside of your work hours. And so that's typically how it works. So always you want your educational goals as the primary focus of your position, and for your hours to be completed outside of the assigned work hours, like I mentioned. There's some agencies every once in a while that will lessen someone's caseload so that they can do like 30 hours a week at their job and then 10 hours a week in this other department or other role. I would say that's pretty rare, but it does happen sometimes. And then again, the employment supervisor being separate. And of course, your supervisor for your internship needs to have an MSW of 2 or more years experience. They don't have to be a licensed clinical social worker, but they do have to have an MSW of 2 or more years. And then about the supervision, so you're going to receive, even if you're not employment based, just regardless, you're always going to receive an average of 1 hour a week of supervision from someone with an MSW degree and 2 years post MSW social work experience. And that applies to employment-based and non-employment-based. So in the placement process web course, you'll see information about employment-based field placement. And you'll want to just start exploring that if you think that that's an option where you work. But when you are assigned a field faculty for your placement process, then that's when you'll really want to kind of start having that conversation with your field faculty so they can assess if it's an appropriate level of learning for you, if the tasks that you're going to be doing are appropriate for your learning competencies, and if your employer is on board with it. So not always guaranteed for sure, but definitely if you feel like it's something that could be an option, definitely worth the conversation and the conference on that so that the field faculty can assess if that's going to be a good fit.
Okay, so these are some tips that we have come together on in terms of making sure that you are successfully placed. So these are the things when students talk to me about not getting a placement, these are the things that I find really make a difference. So of course, the first one being your schedule, right? As Ms. Ferretti mentioned, you know, you're going to need 2 days a week where you've got a big chunk of time, maybe 3 days, you know, and making sure that you have, you know, the ability to be available at different times. That's going to be something that you're going to be discussing with the agency when you go for your interview. So you want to have an idea of when you're going to be available. And if you are currently in a position where you work 8 to 3, 8 to 4, 8 to 5, and you don't have a way to change that schedule to give you a good chunk of time, a couple days a week, then you really need to reach out to me to talk about what your options are because, you know, even though we say like you need to be available 8 to 5, most agencies are not able to host students from 3 to 7. That's just not how they can function. So as Ms. Ferretti mentioned, like they want you to be there when they have the most number of social workers on staff that can support you. Reliable transportation can be a concern for students. You want to make sure that you can get to your field placement. You will be placed up to 1 hour's drive from where you live. So you want to make sure that you are able to get there. That you're open to unexpected opportunities. And by this, I mean that you might have your heart set on working with individuals with eating disorders, but there may not be opportunities for field placement in your area with that population. And sometimes what we find is that students end up in a placement that was never on their radar, and it turns out to be something that they become very passionate about, and they didn't even know that it was something that they would really enjoy doing. So just being open to what might come. Monitoring your night's email. So we talk about this all the time in general, us advisors, about making sure that you're paying attention to your night's email. This is how the field team is going to communicate with you. And very often those emails will be time sensitive. So they will contact you and say, you need to reach out to this agency, and they will give you a deadline of when to do that. So you want to make sure that you're not missing out on your placement opportunity because you're not checking your email. Communicating with the field faculty. So anytime something is happening, you need to make sure that the field faculty are aware. So if you have a change in your situation, either because you're having to move, your job is changing, your schedule is now, you're not as flexible in terms of your availability. You think that you might you find out that you're having a baby and you need to take some time off, whatever that might be, you want to be sure that you're communicating with the field faculty throughout your placement process. So any delay in communication or not being open with the field faculty can really have an impact on your placement. And then professional attire and behaviors in all interactions with agencies. So remember that to treat this like you would a job, and to be dressed professionally, to treat other people with respect. And remember that even people that you think don't have anything to do with the department you're working in, they have influence on what happens in that department. So you want to make sure that that they know what is happening. So yes, and Ms. Freddie has mentioned in the chat that field faculty and agencies will communicate via your NIGHTS email. So, so you'll see that as well, that agencies will reach out to you. So what to do? So there are times where a placement fails. And this could be any number of things. And Ms. Freddie, do you want to talk a little bit about this? What happens when a student ends up with a failed placement? Like reasons why they might end up, you know, with a failed placement.
Sure. So we want to avoid this at all costs, obviously. The goal is absolutely to get everybody successfully placed and be able to hit the ground running when spring semester starts. Unfortunately, sometimes the placement process is not successful. And the most common ways that we have found this to be the case is lack of communication with the assigned field faculty, like Renee mentioned, in terms of, you know, we're going to reach out to you in an email with a interview opportunity. And the agencies are only required to hold that opportunity for 48 hours. So when you get 48 business hours, that doesn't mean you have to meet with them in 48 hours. It just means that when we send you the email, the agency holds the spot and is willing to hold the spot to interview you, to hear from you within 48 business hours. So that turnaround, you'll want to call them, send an email to start that process rolling, to coordinate meeting with them. And so sometimes we find that if students are not communicating or they're not checking their NIGHTS email and they're not checking in with their field faculty, that those opportunities can be missed. Or like Renee mentioned, you know, maybe you move in the middle of your field placement and then we found you a field placement in Georgia and we say, here's your placement. And you say, oh, well, I moved to Alaska. So, you know, those kind of things do come up and that can definitely cause, unfortunately, a student to have to sit out for a few semesters until they can enter back into the program and into their field placement process. And again, these policies and expectations and things like that are all reiterated several times throughout the placement process course and the field manual. The availability being too restrictive, such as seeking a nights and weekends only placement, which again is why we have the specific policy regarding that students who are only available in nights and weekends cannot be accommodated. They're not eligible to be placed in an agency. So that can definitely create a situation where there's not a secured placement. You wanted to do employment-based and it's all set up and then you quit your job. Now you don't have a job and you don't have an internship. That's a big thing that comes up often because many times it happens with not enough turnaround time to where now we're starting from scratch to find a placement. That kind of situation will result in the student, again, needing to work with Ms. Renee and revising the plan of study to sit out 1 or 2 semesters from the program so that we can start the placement process over again. The next bullet I mentioned in my rambling of my first paragraph there a few seconds ago, moving. So we don't know that you moved or you moved too far into the process for us to, again, start from scratch and do an entire placement process to try to find an agency willing to host you in that turnaround time. And then lastly, this is rare, but it does come up, refusing to go on an interview with your assigned agency. So we send you the email, we say, here's the agency you're assigned to interview with, and a student might write back or call and say, I don't want that placement. And so when that happens, right, that gets documented as a failed placement, an unsuccessful attempt at placement, or declining a placement. So you go to the placement, they're willing to host you, everything's great, but you're saying, well, I'm not really feeling it. I don't want to do this placement. So again, obviously we cannot force you, right, to be at a placement, but just know that if that were to happen, now you've got to work with Miss Renee, revise your plan of study, and go ahead and prepare to sit out 1 or 2 semesters until you can restart the placement process from the beginning. Again, I always try to remind students, when you do that, because sometimes a student might say, well, I really don't want this placement. I'm going to sit out 1 or 2 semesters, and maybe when I come back, I'll get a better placement. But that very well might not happen. If when you come back, that's still the only agency that is willing to host, then you might end up, in the same situation. Or sometimes we've had it where it's like a worse situation where a student's not really loving a placement that they were offered, and they sit out and they come back, and then it ends up being a placement that they really is not desirable to them at all. So those are the kind of things that come up pretty often that definitely create barriers to having a secured placement process.
And one thing I wanted to make a note on about the moving, because this does come up, students do come to me. When we're talking about moving or relocating, we're really talking about leaving the area of where you have noted. So if you are living in Atlanta and that's what you put on your application and your field information form, and then you move to a different suburb of Atlanta, and you are still within an hour drive of where you put on your application, you're fine. You can let your field faculty know that, but that's not something that would necessarily lead to a failed placement. When we're talking about that, we're really talking about moving really too far away in order to commute to the location where you said you were available to be placed. So just to clarify that, because that comes up every semester, there's always someone who's like, oh no, I just found out I have to move and I'm going to have to sit out. And that's just not always the case. So just so everyone's aware. Oh, goody. I'm going to talk about this a little bit. State licensure rules. So the reason that I want you to start thinking about this now, you're a long way from getting licensed still, right? You're just getting started and you haven't had your field placement. But just, I want to make sure that everyone understands that this program meets the licensure requirements for the state of Florida. So if you live in Florida and you're getting licensed in Florida, you are good to go and you do not need to worry. But states vary in the requirements. So if you don't live in Florida or you're thinking about getting licensed in another state than Florida, then you really want to know the basics for the state you want to get your LCSW. So typically, the general rule is they're looking for you to have an MSW from a CSWE accredited program, which we are. They're going to want you to take the national ASWB exam, and that varies by state, whether you need to take, with the state level exam is different. And then also to have some sort of supervised practice, clinical practice after you graduate. So in addition to your field placement that you're going to do, they're going to want you to have some supervised practice. Now, the amount of time that you need to be supervised or the amount of hours that you need to complete in order to be eligible to be licensed, this varies highly between states. So it's important to know what that is, but also to know if there's any specific things. For example, Florida requires LCSWs to have a course in human sexuality. So if you're getting licensed in Florida, you're going to want to choose that course as an elective so that you have taken the course before you finish your degree, or you're going to have to seek it when you after you graduate. In addition to that, there's other states who have different requirements. So like the state of New York requires that the person who does your supervision in your field placement in your MSW program, they need to be an LCSW, not just an MSW. So our program requires that your supervisor be an MSW, but your state, if you're going to be getting licensed in New York, will require that person to be an LCSW. So you want to make sure that you know the rules and that you're communicating that with your field faculty and ensuring that those things are happening, because it's we can only guarantee that what we offer to you meets the license requirements for the state of Florida. So finding out about how to do that, we'll be sending this to you, so you'll be able to click this link, but you can check out the ASWB website. They have a place where you can find the board for your state. You can also do just a general Google search of LCSW in your state, but the ASWB website has a great tool for determining what the rules are and how those apply to you. So, and just remember, it is your responsibility to ensure that your plan meets the requirements for your state. So, Adriana is a great person to talk to about this, because she does a lot with the licensure letters and things like that, and so she's really aware of a lot of the rules there. Okay, next up, taking a break. So you might need to take a break if you're relocating, right? You do need to move. And this happens sometimes, job change, military, husband getting transferred, you're getting transferred. Any of those things can cause someone to relocate. You're committing to doing 3 semesters at the same agency. So if for some reason you're not able to do that, then you would definitely want to talk to us to take a break and then start back up again in your field placement in your new location. It could be that you're having health concerns, and this could be anything from physical to psychological to having a baby, any of those things. But if that's a concern, if there's financial issues because you are going to need to reduce your work hours in order to accommodate the time that you need for field placement, or if you have any other personal concerns, or maybe you're just not sure, then you can contact me and we can kind of talk about it. You can talk to your assigned field faculty, but either way, if one of us determine that you need to take a break, then you would just reach out to me. We'll revise your plan of study, and if necessary, also complete a request for a special leave of absence if you're going to take a leave more than 1 or 2 semesters. Okay, so Ms. Vardy, you want to tell them what they can expect now?
Sure. So do you mean kind of what to expect when, like, after the web course opens? Oh, you're right.
Sure. So so they're going to get maybe I can just cover it. So
Okay.
So they're going to, they're going to be getting their invitation from you, correct?
Yes.
To be joined into the course.
Yes.
So
So it'll come
and then
from
just
web courses though, not from me.
right, and it'll come from web
Yeah.
courses.
Yeah.
So you're going to get yes. So you guys are going to get started on that this summer and work on that into the fall. And then I'm thinking about, the semester that you start your field placement, you are going to be doing your 2 7-week core courses. And then you will also have 2 field education courses that will be added to your schedule. So just like in previous semesters, Adriana will send you the schedule of courses, specific sections for your cohort. So that will continue. You'll have those field classes, but those field classes run the whole semester. So there's no break in the field. You'll attend your field placement during the breaks between the semesters, and you will also have field assignments due during the week that you're on break between terms in a semester. So you want to make sure you're paying attention to the syllabus and those assignment due dates. So the other thing that I talk to students about is, when you're thinking about adding, 3 or 4 credit hours to your schedule, plus 10 hours a week at your placement, as well as travel to and from, really requires strong organization and time management skills. So just sort of try to imagine what your life will be like when you're doing all of these things and where you think you're going to need some extra support. So, and then start building that support network. So if you feel like time management is something you already struggle with, reach out to your success coach and she can help you with setting some goals around that and giving you some strategies with that. If you feel like childcare might be an issue, then now is the time to start exploring what what kind of options you have for childcare and lining that up now. You know, sometimes we had a student who had to take a break once because she was on a wait list for childcare and wasn't able to get her child into daycare in order to start her field placement. So, so always thinking about that. You know, what sort of help do you need in managing household duties, or what will your job need? What changes we need to make at your job? Like, start imagining yourself in that role and what you need to do so that you can prepare for a successful start to your field placement. Was there anything you think I should add to that, Ms. Freddie, or did I cover that okay?
Yeah, that sounded really good. I think you you covered it. I was just thinking about saying a little bit about the two field education courses, because I know that sometimes when people see those additional courses, that can look a little stressful. So one of the field courses is literally a pass-fail course that you're going to submit your hours every other week, and you're going to submit your supervision, your confirmation of supervision every other week. So one of those field classes is just kind of a holding for that. It's not a course that has quizzes or papers or written assignments and things like that. It's literally just you're uploading your hours log, your supervision log, and at the end of the semester, your evaluation from your agency. And then the other course is a graded field course, which does have assignments every other week. It has discussion posts, and it has reflections on what you've been doing in your placement for the past few weeks and things like that, graded assignments. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, because I know sometimes when people see that there's 2 field courses on top of their 7-week course, that sometimes that can look a little stressful. But once you know what's in the courses, it gives you kind of a broader perspective of that, so that it doesn't feel like, you know, you're going to be doing heavy assignments in both courses. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Christine. I did want to jump in and say that I'll be sending the schedule out this week. And so the students are all going to see 2 classes listed for field. You will need to register for both of them. Even though Ms. Ferretti said that one is just to upload some of your logs, be sure to register for both of them, because they work in tandem and you need to have both of them on your schedule in order to get your full credit for your field classes.
Yes, and you have to pass both of them. So, you know, if you, let's say you don't pass the graded one, but you got all of your hours in and you got a good evaluation in the ungraded one, you can't move forward. They go hand in hand. And so that's really important to remember. But yes, and you'll have the same instructor for both every time. So if you have me, for example, for your one field course, you're going to have me for the other field course. You're always going to have the same instructor for both field courses.
Okay, this is the time to turn over. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see the chat. And this is your opportunity to ask some questions. We ran a little long because I'm very chatty today, but feel free to either type your questions in the chat, or you can just turn on your microphone to ask. And we've got maybe 7 or 8 minutes for questions. Yes, we will have access to this PowerPoint. So after today's session, we will send all of the students and also the field faculty, I can share with you as well, the link to the recording today's session, as well as the PowerPoint. And if there's anything else that you guys need, you can always just reach out to us.
Renee, I think over time, you've been able to add to this PowerPoint to the point where, right now there's.
I know. I feel like we've
It's good.
managed to answer most of the questions that
Yeah.
people bring to us. Yes. Yeah, which is good. It's good. We want to make sure that everyone knows what they're looking for. So Bailey says, things to be on the lookout for: invitation to the web course and an email from Adriana regarding those 2 additional field courses. So yes, the invitation for the field placement for spring 2022, that should be coming to you. Ms. Freddie said later, later this week. And then Adriana's email regarding registration for the fall will also be coming out this week. But just to clarify, it's for fall registration. So your cohort won't actually see field courses on the list that Adriana sends to you, but that's the email that you'll get from her in the fall that will include the field courses. So that's what we're talking about. That email that you get every semester from her with registration. Rebecca would like to know if there's an opportunity to give input for placement if we're aware of local organizations that take interns.
Yes. So we always have to, there will be an opportunity for you to do that once you're assigned to field faculty and you start having those collaborations. It's going to definitely be a collaborative effort. We always have to, we're obligated contractually to check in with the agencies in your area that we already have. So, let's say if you are in, if you're in Georgia, in an area of Georgia where there's already 4 active partnerships that we're contracted with, we're obligated to check in with those first and explore those opportunities first. And then if they're not available or they're not options, then we would be collaborating with you to work for you to kind of identify some more opportunities. But yes, when you apply for field, about 6 to 8 weeks after you apply for field placement through the web course, then that is between 6 and 8 weeks is when you will hear from one of us, one of the field faculty that says, I'm your person, you're assigned to me for placement process. Let's kind of get the collaborative effort started. Point would be when it would be appropriate for you to say, I live in such and such area, and I know that there are these few agencies there might be an opportunity, and then the field faculty would explore that as you go along. They would explore that. So yes, you can identify, and then the field faculty would kind of pick it up from there and explore if it's a viable opportunity. There's also a place, so when you do your field placement information form, which is one of the first assignments in the course, you could list it in there if you do know of any, but even if you do that, I really recommend still going ahead and reiterating it, and bringing up the suggestions again once you're assigned a field faculty. And I don't know, I think that Josette might have the most amount of students sometimes that are kind of collaborating to give suggestions, because she mostly places students that are outside of Florida. So I don't know if you want to add to that, or if I explained that thoroughly.
Christine, I think you did a great job. Thank you. And as soon as you're assigned, we will email you explaining kind of our own process of our style of working with you. And probably about 17 times in my email, I talk about the importance of communication. It may be 102, I'm not sure. But ideally, it's communication, because I don't live in Fresno, California, or Salt Lake City, or I don't live in Miami, Florida either. So, we take communication and collaboration very important, but there's conversations that need to be held before just calling agencies on your own, or you reaching out, me reaching out. So the importance of, if you have ideas, once you get my email, or all the other field faculty's emails, shoot them back an email and, hey, I had a coworker that such and such. My mother's neighbor's cat's friend heard of this agency, but I don't know. You know, we may already have a contract with them. You don't know. So communication. Thanks, Christine.
All right. Next question is about whether a student will be given only one option for one placement.
The short answer is yes. There are sometimes situations where two agencies might get back to us in the same week, you know, so let's say agency A gets back and they're like, hey, this student looks great. I'd like to go ahead and move forward. And then the next day, another agency, right? Because we're not only reaching out to one agency at a time and waiting for a response, right? We kind of cast our net, right? Sometimes we might cast our net and we just get one response and the rest are no, or the rest are maybe, and we're like, well, we don't have time for maybes, you know, and so, you know, but yes. So sometimes though, you kind of hit like a little jackpot, right? And it's like, oh, the student looks great. And we're like, hey, here's your assigned agency. And then the next day we wake up and we have another email and it says, this student looks great. Awesome. Okay. So now you're able to go ahead and go on to interviews. But I just want to really reiterate that if you hear that that happens or it happens to you, know that that's not like a shared experience that everybody has. It's kind of like, you know, a little bit of, like I said, like a little bit of a jackpot, right? And so, but I would say that in general, it usually ends up where you get that one. You always want to treat that opportunity like that's your only opportunity, right? So we don't want to be going into an interview like, well, something else might come up, right? Because yeah, something else might, but it might be too late in the game. Or you could wait several weeks for an interview and they could be like, no, never mind. And so I don't know. So that's yeah. So I would be prepared to get that one opportunity, right? And then sometimes other opportunities might come. And if it's not too late in the game, then okay, you know, go ahead and go on both. But when an agency is offering to interview, it's because they're expecting you to host you, right? It's not like, well, let me see if this is going to work out. It's usually if I'm interviewing you and I'm an agency, it's because I'm expecting that we're going to keep moving forward.
And Ms. Ferretti, I don't know if you want to say that it's very likely that their placement will be different for generalist and clinical year. So while you are committed for 1 year for your generalist placement, you'll go through this process again for clinical year.
Yeah.
For another placement.
For another place. Yes. Yep. So you're going to go through this whole thing and then we're going to get you a great generalist placement and you'll be there for 3 semesters, which is basically a year. And then in like the middle of your generalist, we'll open up the web course again and you'll be a clinical student in the blink of an eye. Feels like a blink of an eye to us. To you guys, it doesn't. It's many 7 weeks of classes and internship later, right? But to us, it's kind of like, oh, here's this student again. Now they're a clinical student. So yes, great point, Adriana. So then you'll go through this process again as a generalist student, but you'll be like a pro by then. So it'll be like a veteran and you'll just be like, okay, yep. And then we'll find you another you know, separate agency for the 3 semesters for clinical. So Ms. Ricks was sharing in the comments in the chat that her experience with agencies and students in the past have been students often have more than one interview, but that is in face-to-face and not typical in online, correct? So if you're collaborating with peers that are in face-to-face on-campus programs, that is very typically the standard because they have this solid group of like 40 agencies that they use over and over and over again. And so they're able to say, oh, you can go to these 3 options and choose one. Those are like, that's usually the standard in like an on-campus program, but definitely the standard in online education is we cast our net far and wide and we see what comes up. And we also want it to be appropriate, right? Sometimes I know that Josette and Shelly and Janice will laugh, but like sometimes agencies respond to us so quickly, like in 3 minutes, and it's like, do you even know what you're agreeing to? Like maybe, you know, it's almost like they're too eager. Like, oh, a student, yep, give me a student. Then we have to, you know, it's our job to kind of be like, well, wait a minute though, you know, what's going on at your agency? Like, we don't want them to just be trying to fill seats, right? So it's not only about like the first person that answers us, it's the first person that's agreeable plus the appropriateness and the quality, right? So, and then Ms. Hall was sharing that, so Ms. Hall worked for many years at the UCF School of Social Work in the on-campus track for many years. And she was sharing that even in the face-to-face program, the on-campus program, the students are matched and they don't have several interviews. And so we are very committed to modeling that same process, because we are one program and we're 2 different tracks. So it's very important that we stay in line with that. And so that's a great point that, yeah, even here at UCF in the School of Social Work, they're matched similar. It's like the same script. They apply for field, you get an assigned agency to interview with, and then you move forward.
Right. So Christine, I think, you know, this really speaks to Ms. von Bergelin's point about the importance of communication, because then what's happening while students are waiting to hear is that the field faculty are doing that work of introducing the students to the agencies, letting them know about their interests and their skill set, and making sure that the opportunity that becomes available to the student is appropriate for what they need in terms of their learning experience, but also their readiness and their interest in the field and their skills. So you're doing all of that work that might happen in other programs via multiple interviews. You're doing all of that first before the student has that interaction with the agency. So when they get that contact with that one agency, that's the one that we feel is really, it's not just that it's like it's the only opportunity, but it's the best opportunity that we feel the student is going to learn the most and benefit the most from.
Yes.
Awesome.
Thanks, Renee, because that's important. I want to just add my quick 2 cents to the students to just remember that this is not your career. This is an internship. And so your first year generalist, it's going to be case management. It might be stuff that you've already done, but you have to do this to get your degree. It's going to be a good learning experience. It's going to be a great supervisor. It might not be with the population that you want to get your or have your career in. It's an opportunity to learn some new tasks, some set of skills. So I always just tell students, be open to that, because it's just about learning and learning those set of skills, not that eating disorder population that you have to be with. You can get a job in your career in that, but this is an internship. So that's just my little 2 cents, you know, to be aware of that and be open. And that's why communication is so important.
That's really not even just a little 2 cents. That's so important. I feel like we should add that to the PowerPoint actually, because I think that we forget to say that, and then we remember when it comes up multiple times, right? So I'm so glad you brought that up, Shelly, because that's definitely something that all the field faculty we have to reiterate so many times when it gets to the matching process. It's about demonstrating your competencies, right? So you should be able to do that in any setting. And so that's what the goal of the internship is. It's a agency for you and an opportunity, like Ms. Hall said, to demonstrate your competencies. And then when you get your MSW, you're free to work with any population that you want to work with, and you'll be well equipped to do that. And so, yes, I think that is such an important point.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to Miss Ferretti and Miss Von Berglund and Miss Hall and Miss Ricks and Adriana for being here today, and for all of you for participating. Sorry that we ran a little bit over, but hopefully you got a lot out of today's session, and we look forward to seeing you in field placement soon. So thank you, everyone.
Bye. Have a good day.